He slammed his fist on the steering wheel for the third time, the leather squeaking beneath his grip. Sweat clung to his forehead, despite the blasting AC that had died 10 minutes ago. The sun was unrelenting, high over the empty southern highway, cooking the blacktop and boiling his patience. David Thompson Jr. checked his Rolex again. 2:47 p.m. He was supposed to be presenting a major acquisition proposal to his father's board in exactly 13 minutes. And here he was, stranded in the middle of nowhere, inside his sleek silver Mercedes that had started smoking like a busted grill. His phone had no bars, no signal, no help, no power. Just the humming heat and the rising frustration of a man used to having the world move when he snapped. He stepped out in his $1,000 loafers, regretting it instantly. The soles nearly stuck to the blistering road. He popped the hood, and a cloud of steam greeted him like a slap. Coughing, swearing, he loosened his tie and cursed under his breath. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "What kind of backwater doesn't have basic coverage?" Then came the sound, the slow, growling approach of an old pickup truck, engine rattling like it was stitched together with wire and hope. It stopped a few yards behind him. He squinted. Out stepped a woman. Black. Tall. Dust on her boots. Grease stains on her jeans and a faded red flannel tied around her waist. Her curly hair was pulled into a tight bun, and she walked like she didn't have time for nonsense. "You need help?" she called out casually, walking toward him with a small metal toolbox swinging in her grip. David raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "You a mechanic?" he asked, the smirk already forming. "Yeah," she said flatly, not breaking stride. He looked her up and down. "You sure you know what you're doing?" She didn't answer. She stepped right past him and leaned under the hood, like she owned the damn car. Her hands moved fast, confident, like someone who'd done this 1,000 times. David stood beside her, arms crossed, irritated but intrigued. "I have a meeting in the city in less than 10 minutes, he said. "You're lucky I came by then," she replied, adjusting something under the hood. "Cooling system's about to blow. I can patch it up. You'll make it back, but drive smart, or you'll be walking the rest of the way." Her voice was calm, steady. She didn't look at him once. He frowned. "Where'd you learn to work on these?" "Experience. And books. Not that it matters." She grabbed a part from her truck, swapped it in, tightened 2 clamps, and shut the hood with a soft thud. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes. "There. Should give you 2 or 3 hours if you don't push it." He stared at her for a second, slightly stunned. Then, without a word, he pulled out his wallet. Crisp bills. At least 100. "Here, for your time." She reached out, palm open. And that's when he saw it. A silver ring. Thin. Worn. But the deep blue sapphire in its center gleamed in the light. David's hand froze mid-air. His expression changed instantly, like someone just slapped a ghost across his memory. Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice suddenly lower, less sure. She instinctively closed her fingers around the ring. "Why?" He swallowed. "That ring, that belonged to Clara." The name lingered like smoke between them. Clara, the black housekeeper his family once employed when he was a boy. Sweet, quiet Clara, who always hummed gospel under her breath and called him Baby David. The one who vanished when he was just 11. He hadn't heard her name in 20 years. The woman standing in front of him didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, eyes unreadable. "You remember Clara?" she asked. David stared at her, eyes flicking between her face and the ring. Something was clawing at the back of his memory, but he couldn't reach it. She worked for us, my family, years ago. He stopped. She disappeared. She didn't disappear, the woman said, voice like steel. She was erased. David blinked. The heat, the silence, the ring. He was looking at a stranger, but something told him he wasn't a stranger to her. She turned without another word and walked back to her truck. If that patch fails, she called over her shoulder, my shop's 10 miles down. First left after the church sign. Hope Auto. Then she drove off, dust trailing behind her like a warning. David stood alone, the engine humming quietly now, the air around him suddenly colder. That ring was never supposed to resurface. And yet, here it was, and she was wearing it. The bell above the garage door jingled as Zariah pushed it open with her elbow, toolbox still in hand. The place smelled of oil, steel, and home. Old fan blades spun overhead, rattling slightly like they always did. A beat-up radio hummed low jazz from the corner. In the back, her uncle was under the hood of a '98 Buick, humming along as if the world outside didn't exist. "You're back early," he said without looking up. "Not really," she replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "White Benz broke down 2 miles out. Fancy suit, angry attitude, cooling system almost fried." He chuckled. "Let me guess. Didn't believe you could fix it?" "Didn't even believe I was the mechanic," she said, tossing her toolbox on the workbench. Uncle Ray stood up, wiping his hands on a towel, eyes narrowing at her tone. "You good?" She hesitated. He saw the ring. Ray's smile faded. Did he say anything? He froze, like he'd seen a ghost. He stepped closer. "Did he recognize you?" "Number. Just the ring." Ray exhaled deeply, pulling a stool closer. "You sure you want to keep wearing that thing out there?" She looked down at her hand. The silver band was dull, the sapphire scratched, but it still caught the light like it remembered better days. "I wear it so I don't forget," she said quietly. "If I take it off, it's like letting them win." Ray nodded slowly. "Fair enough." She opened the back door and walked into the small room behind the garage. Her living space, half workshop, half home. The floor was clean, the furniture old, but cared for. She stepped toward the wooden chest under her bed and pulled it out. Inside were items she hadn't looked at in months. A photo, faded and crumpled, of a woman with strong eyes and soft hands. Clara, her mother. Beside it, a stack of old newspapers, articles about the Thompson family. Wealth, philanthropy, real estate empires. In every article, there he was, David Thompson, Jr., clean-cut smile, expensive suits, shaking hands with governors and CEOs. She picked up one headline. Next Generation Leader. David, Jr., expands Thompson legacy. She scoffed. Legacy built on lies. She pulled out the envelope tucked beneath the articles, the one she'd never opened. The handwriting was faded, but unmistakable. Her mother's. For Zariah. When you're ready. She turned it over, fingers trembling slightly. She hadn't opened it because part of her wasn't ready. Part of her hoped Clara would come back and read it to her herself. But that hope had expired long ago. She slipped the letter out, unfolded it slowly. Zariah, if you're reading this, I never got to explain. I was taken from you, not by accident, but by force. I was silenced to protect a secret. one that doesn't belong to them. You were never supposed to stay lost. You have something they want, and I left you something they can't erase." Zariah stared at the last line, her hands going cold. What did they want? Why now? Why him? She folded the letter back carefully and placed it beside the ring's original box, a small velvet pouch her mother used to keep in her apron. A soft knock pulled her back to the present. Ray stood in the doorway, concern etched into his face. "You thinking about going back there?" She looked up. "He doesn't remember me, but he remembered the ring." "That means something." "It means someone's still hiding something, and it started with Clara." Ray sat down on the edge of the bed. "You start pulling at these threads, Z. You better be ready for what unravels." "I've lived in this town my whole life fixing engines no one else would touch. I've been underestimated, ignored, passed over, and left behind. But my mother—" Her voice cracked just slightly. "My mother didn't deserve to vanish." Ray didn't say anything. He just nodded. "You still have the file?" she asked. He walked out and came back with a small binder. Yellowed pages, copies of legal documents, wages unpaid, land transactions, signatures, all pointing back to the Thompsons. "Been waiting 20 years for you to ask for it," he said. Zariah looked at the folder, then at the photo of her mother. "I think it's time," she whispered. Outside, the sun had started to fall. But inside that small workshop, something was rising. A storm that had waited 2 decades to be named. The Thompson estate used to shine like a monument. Long white columns, manicured lawns, brick pathways so clean they glowed. Inside, the floors never creaked. The air smelled like lemon polish and old money. Clara knew every inch of that house better than the people who owned it. She didn't just work there. She ran that house, cleaned it, cooked, raised the boy. She knew the sound of his footsteps before they turned the corner. She knew how to calm him down when his parents yelled, how to fix his tie before school, how to soothe him when he cried over bullies. But the one thing she wasn't allowed to be was equal. Clara never spoke back, never complained, until that one Friday. She had gone to collect her paycheck, the one already 2 weeks late. She stood quietly at the office door as David Sr. counted money into a silver clip. "I haven't been paid this month, sir," she said gently, eyes lowered. He looked up, startled, then annoyed. "You're not here to make demands." She kept her voice calm. "Just want what I earned, sir." He paused, eyes narrowing. "You people always pushing when you should be thankful." Clara froze. She had heard things over the years, but that was different. He leaned forward. "You think just because my son calls you Mama sometimes, you're part of this family?" "I never said that," she whispered. "But you thought it." He stood up slowly, walking around the desk. "You've been teaching your daughter in the pantry. Think I don't know?" Clara's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Don't play innocent," he said. "I saw the books. She's learning to read. From you." Clara found her voice. "I want her to have more. That's not a crime." He stopped inches from her face. "In this house, it is." The next day, she was gone. No goodbyes, no notice, no forwarding address. David Jr. had asked where she went. His mother said, Clara quit, took the money and ran. That was the story passed around. A dishonest maid who stole from the family and disappeared. No one questioned it. No one checked the police report. No one asked how a woman who worked 14 hours a day and never missed a single shift suddenly vanished with no trace. Because deep down, they didn't want to know. Zariah was just 8 when it happened. She remembered being shaken awake in the middle of the night, her mother whispering urgently in her ear, "Z, if anything happens, you go to Uncle Ray. You hear me?" "Where are we going?" "No questions now. Just trust me." She'd grabbed the ring box and pressed it into Zariah's hands. "This belonged to your grandmother. It'll belong to you now. No matter what they take from us, don't let them take this." Zariah had clutched it tightly even after her mother was dragged out of the little house they lived in behind the main estate. 2 white men in black suits, no badges, no names. One held Clara by the arm, the other told Zariah to stay inside. Then the door slammed, and that was it. By the time Ray found her 3 days later, the house had been emptied. Her mother was gone, and the Thompsons claimed they had no idea who Clara even was. "She was never employed here," they told the state social worker. "No record, no pay stubs, no contract. Erased." The file Ray kept, the one Zariah now held in her hands, was the only proof left. He'd secretly saved copies of her mother's employment forms, handwritten notes from the kitchen manager, even Christmas cards Clara had written for the boy. But no one ever wanted to see it. Not the courts, not the police, not the press. No body, no crime, no headline. Just another black woman gone quiet. Ray always said the Thompsons were too powerful, too deep with local judges and sheriffs. "You push that story too hard," he'd warned. "They'll bury you, too." So Zariah stayed silent, grew up in the shadows, learned to fix cars with her uncle, to get grease on her knuckles instead of blood on her hands. But the fire never left. And now the same boy, David Jr., had shown up on the side of the road, needing her. Still clueless, still wearing the empire built on her mother's back like it was a custom suit. But this time, Zariah wasn't a child. She had the ring, the files, the truth, and a name they couldn't bury anymore. The next day, the same silver Mercedes rolled quietly into Hope Auto's gravel driveway. It looked out of place, too clean, too rich, too nervous. David stepped out in a crisp blazer and jeans, trying to look casual, but every movement was stiff. Zariah didn't look up. She was under the hood of a pickup, sleeves rolled up, hair wrapped tight, hands covered in grease. She already knew it was him the second the engine cut off. That car had a specific kind of arrogance. "We're open," she said flatly. David cleared his throat. "Actually, I came to return something." She kept working, not giving him her eyes. "Here," he said. When she finally turned, he was holding something small in his palm, a wooden brooch shaped like a bird, with outstretched wings. It was chipped, old, and familiar. Zariah stared at it for a beat too long. "You kept that?" "You gave it to me," he said quietly. "You carved it yourself. You said it was your freedom bird." Her fingers froze around her wrench. "I haven't seen that in 20 years, she said. "I didn't forget everything," he added. Zariah stepped out from the truck and wiped her hands slowly. "What do you want?" she asked. I had questions." "No, you have guilt. That's different." He hesitated. "I didn't know what happened to Clara. I was just a kid." "And now?" "I looked you up last night. I know who you are. And I think I know what they did." Zariah crossed her arms. "You think?" David pulled out his phone, showed her an image, An old file with his family's crest, stamped with a seal. My father's files are locked down, but I remembered this one. Project Calhoun. I found a mention of land acquisitions tied to Clara's name. It's buried deep. Zariah raised an eyebrow. So now you're digging? I'm trying to understand. Understand what? She snapped. That your family stole wages from a black woman for 5 years? That they accused her of theft, then erased her from every record like she never existed? That they took land from black sharecroppers, hid the deeds, and made a museum on top of it? David looked shaken. I didn't know. She stepped closer. Number. But now you do. He looked at her again. Really looked. The tightness in her jaw. The old anger behind her calm. The ring on her finger. That same ring Clara wore every Sunday, like it meant more than money ever could. I think the ring was hers, he whispered. Zariah didn't respond. I want to help, he said. She laughed, one sharp, bitter note. Help fix what? You can't undo stolen time. You can't replace my mother. But I can expose what happened, he said. The museum's opening next month. I can get you inside. You could... I don't need your permission, she cut in. David stepped back, unsure. I've got the file, she said, with proof, and I've got a name. They buried my mother's legacy, not mine. I believe you, he said. Good, she replied. But believing isn't enough anymore. She turned back to her truck. David lingered for a second too long. What happens now? He asked. Zariah looked at him over her shoulder. Now, she said, now I pull the thread, and we see how much of your world unravels. Then she went back to work, each twist of her wrench echoing like a warning. Behind her, David stood still, holding the carved wooden bird. The last piece of innocence he hadn't realized was stolen, too. The binder lay open across the table, its brittle pages covered in fading ink and painful truths. Zariah and her attorney sat across from each other in a small, quiet law office. No fancy view, no mahogany furniture. Just facts. This is heavy, the attorney said, adjusting her glasses. You mean real, Zariah replied. The woman nodded. You've got records showing years of unpaid wages, a falsified termination report, and this, she held up the deed copy, is a smoking gun. The paper was yellowed but clear. The name Clara Thompson listed as heir to 12 acres of farmland, signed and notarized in 1986. The land was later transferred to Thompson Development, LLC, in 1994, with no sale recorded. They took it, Zariah said. My grandfather worked that land with his bare hands, and now they're putting a history museum on it. Do you know how rare this is? The attorney said. They didn't just rob your family. They built an empire on it. Zariah leaned forward. Can we make it public? The attorney hesitated. With this evidence? Yes. But there will be pushback, threats, pressure. I've lived under pressure since I was 8. The attorney nodded. Then we file an injunction, and we make noise. Outside the office, rain had started falling in soft taps against the windows. But inside, something louder was building. Zariah drove home with the folder strapped to her front seat like a passenger. Every red light felt like time stretching. Every passing street light reminded her of nights spent waiting for a mother who never came home. Back at the garage, Uncle Ray was pacing. You serious about this? He asked when she walked in. She dropped the folder on the table. Already filed. He didn't say anything for a moment. You know how deep the Thompsons run in this town. This ain't just about your mama. You're going up against money, history, judges who golf with their lawyers. I'm not scared, she said. I am. Zariah sat down. They've taken enough. Time to take something back. Ray opened the fridge, grabbed 2 sodas, handed her one. Then let's make sure they can't bury it this time. 2 days later, a local journalist reached out. Then another. Then someone from Atlanta. A leaked email, traced back to a Thompson Foundation employee, confirmed the land originally belonged to black families displaced in the 80s during redevelopment projects. Zariah's name began appearing in articles, her face on small news interviews, quiet, strong, direct. I'm not looking for pity, she told one reporter. I'm looking for truth. Meanwhile, David Jr. stood behind glass conference room doors, watching his father yell into the phone. They're twisting it! They're going to ruin everything! David Sr. shouted. They're not twisting anything, David Jr. replied. His father turned. You don't believe her, do you? I saw the documents. They're real. David Sr.'s face tightened. You think I did this? He snapped. David didn't answer, because deep down, he knew the truth. Zariah was planning something bigger, and she hadn't said a word since the lawsuit hit. But he knew she wasn't done. Then came the announcement. The Thompson Heritage Museum was going ahead with its grand opening. A red carpet event. Politicians, donors, speeches, cameras. They were going to celebrate on stolen ground. David watched his father rehearse a speech in front of a mirror. This museum stands on the foundation of hard work, tradition, and family legacy. He flinched at the word legacy. Zariah sat alone at the kitchen table that night, reading her mother's letter again. You have something they want. Now she understood. It wasn't just the ring. It wasn't just the land. It was the truth. And they couldn't handle it. Not in court, not on stage, not under the eyes of the world. She picked up her phone and called the reporter back. I'd like to make a public statement, she said. At their grand opening, the red carpet stretched across the marble entrance of the Thompson Heritage Museum, flanked by gold stanchions and a dozen photographers. Flashbulbs went off like fireworks as black SUVs pulled up one by one. Celebrities, state officials, and legacy donors walked in smiling, sipping champagne and shaking hands beneath the banner. Honoring the past, shaping the future. David Sr. stood at the center, beaming in a charcoal suit, his wife on his arm. David Jr. hovered nearby, face tight, hands clenched. This is it, his father whispered. 30 years in the making. Inside the glass-walled atrium, a stage had been set. Rows of chairs filled with powerful people, politicians, CEOs, foundation leaders. Cameras were everywhere. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was about to begin. David Sr. stepped to the microphone as applause rippled through the hall. Thank you all for coming, he said, voice polished and practiced. This museum is more than a building. It is a monument to perseverance, to values, to legacy. He paused for effect. And to those who helped build the foundation of this great region. In the back of the room, a door opened. Zariah stepped inside, calm and composed, wearing her mechanic's jacket and boots that echoed across the floor like thunder. Her hair was tied back, and in one hand she held a small leather folder. In the other, the ring on her finger caught the spotlight. Heads turned, cameras shifted. David Jr.'s breath caught. David Sr. frowned. Excuse me, he said into the mic. This is a private event. Zariah walked straight down the center aisle. "My name is Zariah Thompson," she said, her voice cutting clean through the room. "And I am here to reclaim what was stolen." A collective hush fell. Security looked toward David Sr., awaiting a signal. But he didn't give one. Zariah stepped onto the stage, standing beside him, unfazed. "This museum was built on land taken from black families who were erased from your history," she said. "One of those families was mine." She opened the folder and pulled out the documents. "These are the original deeds, signed, notarized, and stolen. My mother, Clara, worked for this family for years. She was fired for teaching me how to read. She disappeared 2 days later. No body. No investigation. Just silence." She held up the ring. "This ring belonged to her, and I wear it now, not for decoration, but because it survived when she didn't." A murmur spread through the audience. Phones came out. Journalists pressed forward. David Jr. stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on his father. "She's telling the truth," he said, voice low but steady. David Sr.'s face flushed. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do," David Jr. snapped. "And you knew too. All this time." The room tilted. Zariah continued. "These aren't just stories. These are facts. Stamped, signed, hidden. Until now." One of the state senators stood up in the audience. "Mr. Thompson, is this true?" David Sr. tried to compose himself. "She's an imposter. She—" Zariah interrupted. "I have a letter, written by Clara, before they made her disappear." She held it up, the paper trembling only slightly. "In it, she warned me. She told me I would have to fight for her memory, for the truth. And I'm here, today, on this land, with that truth." A moment passed like thunderclouds waiting to burst. Then applause. One voice, then another. Then the whole room stood. Not for David Sr., not for the museum, but for the woman who broke the silence. Zariah stood still, eyes wet but firm. David Sr. turned to walk off stage, but not before a journalist blocked his path with a microphone. "Sir, do you deny the accusation that the Thompson Foundation erased black families from this land?" He had no answer. Outside, the news vans rolled in. Headlines were already updating. Museum scandal explodes. Land theft. Racial injustice at center of legacy. David Jr. walked past Zariah, paused, and whispered, "I'm sorry." She didn't reply, because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about the silence that had finally been broken. The land had heard her. The people had listened. And the truth was louder than any legacy ever built on lies. Weeks had passed. The museum still stood, but the lights inside were off. A court order froze the Thompson Foundation's funds pending investigation. David Sr. hadn't made a public appearance since the day Zariah spoke. Sponsors pulled out. Board members resigned. The legacy had cracked, not with a hammer, but with the truth. Zariah stood alone in the field where the museum now sat, but where her family's land had once bloomed with cotton and stories. The tall grass brushed against her jeans as she walked, slow and steady, her boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. She knelt and ran her fingers through the soil. "This is yours again," Ray said behind her. She smiled softly. "It always was." The state had issued a formal apology. The deed was returned. Her mother's name, Clara Thompson, was now listed in public records as the rightful owner, posthumously restored. The land was officially Zariah's. The press moved on to the next scandal. But Zariah stayed. She wasn't interested in headlines. She was interested in roots. Ray brought a folding chair and set it next to her. They sat in silence for a while, just listening to the wind. "You did it," he finally said. "No," she replied. "We did." She looked down at the ring on her hand, cleaned now, shining in the sunlight. She wore it not as a reminder of loss, but as a badge of survival. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the letter, the one Clara wrote. She read it again, this time without the sting. Just pride. She wanted me to grow up strong, not angry. "Strong," Zariah said. "You are." A few days later, a town hall invited her to speak. She walked up to the mic in jeans and a denim jacket, just like always. "My name is Zariah Thompson," she said, "and I want to thank you for finally listening." The crowd was quiet. Not just to me, but to the ones who came before me, the ones who worked this land and were never paid, the ones who were erased because they stood too tall, spoke too clearly, or dared to want better. She held up the ring again. "This is all I had for years, a piece of metal. But it held a memory, and that memory led me to the truth." After the speech, a young black girl walked up to her, no older than 10. "You're brave," she said, clutching her mom's hand. Zariah knelt down and smiled. "So are you." That night, David Jr. showed up at the garage. No suit, just jeans and a tired look. He didn't step inside, just stood near the door. "I read the letter," he said, "the one your mother wrote." Zariah leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He took something from his pocket, the carved wooden bird. He handed it to her. "It belonged to you." She looked at it, then back at him. "You were a kid, but your father wasn't," she said. "I know." "What do you want, David?" "Nothing," he said. "Just peace." She nodded slowly. "Then find it, but not here." He didn't argue. He just turned and walked back into the night. Later, Zariah walked to the edge of her land and planted the wooden bird in the soil. She pressed it down until only the wings stuck out. She looked up at the stars, the same sky her mother once looked at. And for the first time in 20 years, the land felt like home again.